Today, it is Memorial Day weekend, so we're going to chill, sort of.
Soon it'll be back to school, but what will that mean?
Then, do you have a quarantine bubble, and should you?
And our best recommendations for things to read, watch, listen to, and cook.
I'm Steven Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward.
I'm Alexa Scordato. Let's launch.
And we are here to launch. And by the way, our friends at IEEE have provided us with some terrific tutorial that we'll get to as we talk about bubbles and the safety of bubbles and that lovely 6-foot measuring stick, which somehow you're safe if you're within if you're 6 feet away, if you're 5.5 feet away, you're in danger. We'll kind of explore that. But Alexa, I thought we should start with academia, because there's a lot of conversation about it. You pulled some really interesting articles. Tell me what caught your eye.
Well, I mean, last week was graduation, right? And so I think now that graduation season has come and gone, everyone's already starting to think about the fall. And so there are a lot of questions around whether schools should open. And so what better person to ask than Dr. Anthony Fauci?
You know, I keep wondering if I think he's going to be a footnote in history or like the front page of a history book. And, you know, it depends on where his ongoing kind of Cold War with the president ends up.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think this article basically says that it's not a black and white answer. It's not yes or no. It depends. Right. And so I think there are already some schools who have said, nope, we're not going to open. Some schools are going to play it by ear and they're going to sort of follow the guidance from their local states. But I think there are a bunch of students and parents who are just saying, take a gap year.
Yeah, I also think you have to remember, particularly when you're talking about big universities, you know, there's not one customer, right? There's the university professors, and they have concerns and needs about health and safety and also about teaching. And then you've got students, both domestic and international. And for some of the bigger universities, international is a big piece of what they do. Then you've got parents who are often writing the checks. And then you've got the infrastructure of these places, the people that run the facilities, run the buildings, manage, you know, all of the back end operations, keep the buildings clean, keep the students fed, keep the housing in shape. You know, these are like there's no, you know, whatever decisions get made, someone's going to be unhappy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you, as a parent of a recent grad, what would you do if Murray had like 1 year left?
Well, that's a good question. I'm happy to say I've not given that a moment's thought. That's one of the things about where you are in your academic career is you worry a lot about, like, if you were the parent of a freshman right now,
right?
You know, I have some thoughts about what I think people are deciding, but happily not my problem. Very, very hard decision to make.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Harvard has already said we're not opening for the fall. Everyone's going to be remote.
I know. And then there's a lawsuit right now against Columbia, like an anonymous student, and is suing because they want their tuition refunded, or at least partially refunded. Basically, the argument is that, you know, why pay say $70,000 for a semester that is not the full college experience. Making a face.
Well, no, I mean, listen, here's the thing. I mean, there's a million complexities to this. And then I'll tell you about what I know NYU is doing. One of them is, you know, if you're a university or a college whose degree, who brings with their degree all of the weight and history and value of that brand, you probably are in a position, though you not say this out loud, you know, if you're Harvard and the choice is go somewhere else for 6 months or take a gap year or start your Harvard career sooner, and okay, for 6 months of those, you know, 4 years, you'll be, you know, off campus, but you're still going to get a Harvard sheepskin at the end. you're probably not transferring.
Right.
I mean, maybe to Yale or Princeton, but not to Des Moines Community College.
Yeah.
That being said, I think, well, let me tell you what I know about what's going on at NYU, where I run a program and work with students. We are going to open in the fall. That's been decided. Unclear what that means. There are certainly programs for which not having a physical presence is terrible, right? So laboratories, for example, very, very hard to take a lab class remotely. On the other hand, the Media Lab runs a big event in September, and I think the likelihood that we're going to have 1,000 people convening in a large auditorium is very, very low at this point. Hasn't been officially decided, but I think what we're hearing is smaller classes, no big lectures, no 500 kids in a room or attendees to a conference. And I think the thing we all have to ask ourselves is, there's a lot of drumbeat of we're at the plateau, things, we've started to get it under control, things are leveling out. The math doesn't support that.
No, it doesn't. And neither does history. The Spanish flu was a full year.
Yeah. Although to be fair, they didn't have AI and, machine learning and, gene splicing and, all kinds of there, we might actually be able to speed up some of the medical innovation just because, if you look at, for example, how the DNA was decoded, it was being done manually and it was projected to take, 28 years. And then Craig Ventnor came along and all of a sudden it was done in 3.
Yeah. At the same time, the human population we're still people. And so the technology is not eradicating, I think, Americans' desire for freedom and not following the rules.
Yeah. I don't buy that. I think you're wrong. I think I don't think, I don't know. I follow all kinds of rules. When I'm driving in a car at 3 a.m. and there's a red light, even though I know the streets are empty, I still stop and sit at the red light.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying though, if you look at, we're going into a holiday weekend, I just saw this morning, like people in Maine on the beaches, or
but I don't know. I don't have the facts here, but my instinct is it's easy for a television camera to amplify. Yes, there are crowds of people in some places, but the whole idea that going to the beach is liberty, people wear seatbelts. People, there's a whole long list of public health laws that impinge on our liberty. And I don't think going to the beach at the risk of being infected or infecting somebody else. I'm not a big beach goer in a non-COVID world.
Right. Neither am I. Yeah.
My dogs like the beach very
Yeah.
much. It turns out people that control the beaches don't like my dogs.
Yeah.
Very hard to find a dog-friendly beach these days. Anyway, back to colleges though. What I think is interesting about this story and why I think it is catching so many people's eye is, among other things, it really does raise the question of what higher ed is going to be.
Right.
And you've got more than a little experience in what they used to call politely distance learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's evolved so much over the last 10 years. But I think it's just the tip of the iceberg.
But let's drill in, because in some ways this better than I do. When you were at 2U, part of the struggle is what's the product that universities want to provide to students, and I use the word product advisedly. And does an online degree cost $70,000, or does online, as it has done for almost everything else, devalue both the cost and the value of education?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many, where to start?
Explain where you were. Explain that for our viewer listeners who don't know your history.
So, in 2009, 2010, I was working at a company called 2U. They're in this OPM space, online program manager. So it's basically school as a service for universities and colleges who want to go take degree programs online. And so at the time, we were working with schools like Georgetown and USC to basically help them take their graduate programs online. And it was at a time when the University of Phoenix and DeVry and all of these for-profit schools were actually really like fiercely competitive on the internet. And so 2U's value proposition was, we can help you scale and translate what you do best on the internet. And so we would work with faculty and curriculum designers and basically get their content online into a learning management system. And so we were providing the tech. And then we were also facilitating all of the marketing and then the placement services. So if you were going to enroll in Georgetown's Masters of Science in Nursing, and say you were going to enroll in Kansas City, we would actually help the school place that student in a local hospital so that they could complete their sort of the practicum, the sort of practical application of their graduate program, like an internship. And so that was in 2000. That was like 2009, 2010.
So that's a long time ago.
Yeah, and we were sort of a first mover in the space, and 2U raised over $100 million in VC capital before it IPO'd, and since then there have been other OPMs that have emerged. And now when you look online and you search for any type of graduate degree or online program, you're actually not just going to see the traditional for-profit schools like University of Phoenix. You are going to see the likes of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 colleges and universities also competing for attention. So it's wild because, in 2009, 2010, the enemy was sort of like, oh, how do we compete? How do we prove that you can have the same caliber of education, the same rigor and standards online when the market had such a negative perception of what online learning was because of the for-profit schools. So that was one of the biggest challenges that we had. And plus, these schools were also not used to sort of marketing themselves so aggressively. Again, if you think about schools like Harvard or Stanford, right? What is the average size of a business class? Or think about an average cohort at NYU. Like most of the elite schools, it's almost like the more elite you are, the less people have access to the product. There's like absolutely no other market where that's true. Like the better the iPhone or the better the TV show, the more people like want it, buy it, and access it. With higher ed, it's actually completely the opposite.
So it's interesting. So two thoughts about that. One is some of that's marketing. If 2,000 people apply and one gets in, that's 1,999 people who are disappointed, but in some ways marketers of your brand, but because they wanted it so badly, they didn't achieve it. On the other hand, I also think from a teaching standpoint, so everything that we've done at the Media Lab in this last 3.5 months since we've gone virtual has been remarkably successful, but small. Mm-hmm. So, with 7 companies at the Combine, for example, or 4 or 5 companies working with Hakuhodo or not Hakuhodo, doesn't matter, with a number of our different programs. I think if you said to me, hey, I'd like you to run the same NYU Startup Accelerator program, but instead of having 6 companies, I'd like you to have 600.
Yeah.
Because they all applied and they'll all pay some amount of whatever, or it's a good outcome for us. Part of what I bring in value is coaching and mentorship and knowing the companies and knowing where they're going and knowing the students and being able to say, hey, this material needs to be, like at the point at which you're teaching, an auditorium as opposed to a group, it's a very different kind of academic experience.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this whole shift pokes at a few norms or assumptions about what quality means. Does quality equal exclusive? Does quality or the product of online education or traditional universities equal the network? In which case, like potentially having a larger network is to your benefit, but then it's all about the caliber of student, right? Are you actually lowering the standards and the admissions criteria once you go online? And so I think this is a debate and every school is sort of figuring out what their approach is. Is it fully online? Is it live, asynchronous? Is it on campus for simulations? Like in some ways, it actually parallels what every company is actually trying to figure out right now too, when it comes to the future of work.
So let's talk about University of California for a moment, because two big decisions out of the state California system. First of all, and this probably got lost in the noise a little bit, they announced rather recently, a couple of days ago, that they're dropping both SAT and ACT from their admissions process.
Yeah, I thought this was huge. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this.
I don't know I don't know what that means. Like, so you get 1,000 applicants and you've got 10 spots. You need to make a judgment somehow, no?
Yeah, but I think it's, again, every school sort of has a different philosophy in terms of their admissions criteria. And to the extent that they were using SATs and ACTs as sort of a hard input and barometer or cutoff for even considering someone, I think this actually is going to do more to potentially level the playing field. I came from a school district in Long Island where parents were forking over hundreds of dollars in tutoring fees to kind of help their kids score higher on these exams. And, that for me is just a blatant advantage. And so when you remove it as a requirement, then you're potentially looking at other things like grades, how someone has improved over time, extracurricular activities, writing ability, how they show up in an interview, their intent and desire to enroll. And there's so many other factors that can kind of go into the way you evaluate 17, 18-year-old kid.
So let's just kind of to put a button on academia. September is going to be a big day in the future of higher ed. There's going to be extraordinarily complex health and safety issues. So, for example, I believe already one of the institutions that I'm familiar with, I think I know which one it is, but I don't want to guess, has announced that they're going to start earlier. They're going to start August 10th, and they're going to end at Thanksgiving, and they're going to ask the students to stay on campus the entire time.
Yeah, that's in the Atlantic article, I think. Yeah.
Right. Because they don't want kids going back and forth, and they want to create kind of a hermetically sealed bubble on campus.
Yep.
And if someone gets sick, they're going to have one dorm that's going to be set aside for, basically, 14-day, holdout period. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it also, September feels so far away. Like when I think about September being further out than May 9th when I started quarantining, I mean, it feels like eons, right? Like, I don't know about you, but the passage of time for me feels like really warped. I feel like, we're going to learn a lot between now and then.
But then the other thing, even health and safety notwithstanding, is I think there's going to be, I think that what COVID has done is accelerated dramatically the speed at which we're going to have a conversation about what education is and what online is and what people get, what it's worth, what they pay for it, what they gain from it, how we teach into it. And I think it's going to be incredibly painful, but maybe the right time for it.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like we'll experience like a massive like market correction.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So let's move on to this issue of COVID and transmittability. That's not a word. So IEEE Spectrum has an article about the 6-foot rule, and I think it's actually worth talking about seriously. Do we really believe that 6 feet is a made-up number or a real number, and do we feel safer because of it?
I think it's like a safe general baseline, but what this article was pointing out is that the transmission of like airborne particles, basically, depending on the conditions, like a particle of saliva can travel like 18 feet in 5 seconds. And so they studied the movement of air particles and sort of distance and time. And so it just basically, for me, my biggest takeaway was, okay, if you think 6 feet away is enough to save you, it's really the combination of 6 feet and everyone wearing a mask.
So 2 things. I think a lot about, though I wasn't around for it, the whole duck and cover, get under your desk, kids. When in elementary school, if a nuclear bomb is going to hit our town, we're all going to huddle and get under our desks. Did everyone know then that was nonsense?
Definitely not.
But now we know. I mean, so my question is 6 feet the modern day equivalent of that? Like, we're sitting at the CDC. We got to make up we can't say 10 feet. No one's going to do that. And all right, what about 4 feet? We know that's not healthy. All right, well, let's make up a number that seems almost doable on a sidewalk in New York. How far away? 6 feet. Done.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I went on a reading rampage last night and this morning, because I find myself consuming articles like this, which basically confirm the need to just really stay home and wear a mask at all times and to really be overly cautious. And then I read sort of this other set of articles that are like, well, if you are going to go out, here's what you can do. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think this is the same as stop, drop, and roll, because I do think that the distance and marking sort of a minimum is helpful.
Right, stop, drop, and roll was fire, wasn't it?
Not stop, drop, and roll. Sorry, get under.
No, because I think that one's actually legit.
Yeah, stop, drop, and roll is legit.
Kids, if you're listening at home, stop, drop, and roll. Okay.
Yes. So get under your desk.
So I take my dogs out for a walk every afternoon. I walk in a 2-block radius, and in that 2-block radius, I see some of the same people every day. And there's one guy who's sitting on a bench, and he's got a book, and he's got a mask down around his neck.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another guy who's got a mask who sits in another spot, but it's only over his mouth and not his nose.
Totally.
And then there's a bunch of people that aren't wearing masks at all.
Yeah.
And I want to say to them from 6 feet wearing my mask, A, if you can't afford it or don't have one, I'll get you one.
Right.
And B, if it's a political statement and you're with the president and you think that his not wearing a mask and you're not wearing a mask means you're like, mishpucha, like understand that that's like, not only are you likely to get sick and maybe very sick, but so is he. Like,
right.
The crazy nonsense he did at the GM plant where he wore the mask during the tour and then took it off for the press because he didn't want to give the press, quote, the satisfaction of seeing him wearing it. Like,
yeah, but this is what I was saying earlier, which is like, I do think no matter what the technological advances are with this, like, you're just going to have people who kind of like want to go around the rules, or like the rules do not apply to them.
Yeah. See, I don't agree with you. I think that when the president of the United States is actively saying, I'm taking this drug on a preventative basis, even though no doctor will ever sign a prescription for that.
Mm-hmm.
and the president of the United States is standing in front of people not wearing a mask, I don't think it's I don't think it's individual liberty seekers. I think these are people who say Trump's got better information than I do. He's got the best doctors in the world. And if he's saying that
free will, you're just saying that like the information that they're determining as the rules and what is appropriate is misinformed.
Oh, I think it's far more dangerous than misinformed. I think I can't even begin to disassemble, for example, the president saying this weekend, churches are open, I decree it, and you should all go to church. Like, it's not like this is a left or right issue.
Well, did you see the Plandemic video?
No, I've read about it, but I chose not to.
It's petrifying. I was like, how is, yeah.
All right, so moving on, we've determined, so just for those of you who are listening to the advice of Alexa and Steve,
6 feet is not enough. You have to wear a mask, and other people do too.
Yes, and gloves.
Yes.
And, you know, I get if there's a really important gathering that you have to go to, but other than that, just for Christ's sake, I mean, if literally going to the beach means that it's going to be the last summer of your life, I'm not sure the Jersey Shore is worth it.
Yeah.
You know, going to claw your way out to the Hamptons and argue with the locals about the fact that you're from New York and you really want to be on their beach so that you can, like, and it's not even like you're going to put your feet in the water. You're just going to sit in the sand. So just like, you know, I don't know. Anyway, enough preaching. Onward. So we have a couple more things to chat about before we run out of our time. Social distancing, we talked about. Quarantine bubble, this is essentially what you just said. I mean, these are all well informed. Shall we get to the media advice chapter of the program?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Let's do this just for a second. Best alternatives for Zoom video conferencing.
Yeah. Going after Zoom because they're sort of controversial to the extent that Zoom was a secure platform and whatever. And so I've just been seeing left and right all of these conversations about, you know, what's going to be the next Zoom, or, you know, can Microsoft and Facebook compete and take away market share? And it's just interesting because, you know, you see Google, like they announced a few days ago that they're going to release the feature that allows you to blur your background, or they're going to enable that like grid view, like what I call the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
And it's so anyway, it's just interesting because you sort of see this war playing out with big tech giants, but then you're also seeing a lot of funding for these smaller startups that are also trying to do video.
It's not that I don't have some amount of Zoom, you know, fatigue. I just don't think it's any different than Google Meets fatigue or Facebook Hangout Meetup fatigue, or strangely enough, you know, Apple FaceTime, which I find incredibly invasive in ways that I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
Maybe because people tend to want to show you things.
Yeah. I wanted to like talk to you about this and pull these articles because you spent years in the video space. And so I was wondering, like, is any of this reminiscent for you, or like, is it sort of the same parallel where you had some dominant platforms and then smaller players? Like, is this a lot of this, is a lot of what was old new again?
So two things. We talked about this on the show last week, Glenn and I. I thought that Graduate Together was really well made, and I did feel a certain kinship to letting young people have a voice and not making them read a teleprompter and having them shoot their own videos on, you know, they're definitely. And then similarly, the wear a mask promos that New York State is now putting out, that I think Andrew Cuomo released this morning, also seem pretty authentic to me. Like, I do think there is a coming of age of people being able to do UGC, package it in a way that is compelling and authentic. And that goes back to, you know, YouTube unfiltered and early days of UGC. That being said, in terms of platforms, Zoom just has a running head start over everybody. I do think that they're going to need to do some things to jazz up the graphical interface not that long from now before people start to, I mean, I don't know if you played with, but somebody on my team installed Snapchat Lens on top of Zoom. So you can now do, animated, graphics on top of your head and face. It's kind of charming. I almost thought about pulling it together for today, but I didn't have the time. All right, so onward. So if you've got favorites, listeners, if you've got other platforms that you think are better, particularly for webinars or virtual gatherings, we'd love to hear from you either in the comments or send us a tweet. I'm at Magnify Media, and Alexa is, wait for it, at Alexa.
Yes.
How cool is that? Never sell it. Never give it away.
There's someone who has Advil the other day tweeting like, "I'm never giving up my Twitter handle, like unless the the $74 billion pharmaceutical company like makes a real offer." And then I get a lot of people like sending me that like, "Oh, you should talk to Alexa."
It's very funny. All right, so just some tips and tricks of what you're listening to, what you're reading, what you're cooking. Something that's been like a good kind of COVID headspace cleaner.
So all of the farms upstate New York have kind of like banded together. So I'm not sure if you were like a farmers market goer before this. Like I used to go to the one on Lincoln Center and then the one by the Museum of Natural History on Sunday. Yep. And so the farmers market, there's a website you can go to, upstatefarmsny.com, and they're actually just doing like cool direct to consumer farmers market boxes, which is kind of like a CSA. It's nothing necessarily new, but these are like the small joys now. Like Saturday, I get to like pick up my box from the farmer, and then it has all these fresh veggies, and then I get to go look up like, ooh, am I going to make a parsley chive pesto with this bounty of, fresh produce? And I just really love it. Again, it's like, it's a nice marker to the week. And it's also a way to kind of learn new things to cook and make.
I have been watching on Netflix. Well, cooking. I'm still doing bread, which I'm actually on my third loaf and feeling reasonably confident in. And I did another cheesecake, which I'm very excited about being my best one yet. That being said, I'm terrified of sourdough. Absolutely terrified.
But that's what all the cool kids are doing.
I know, but I looked at the recipes and it looks like it's, I didn't algebra
thing,
I know, but it's like days and days of pouring and repouring. And have you ever done?
You have to just go to Nextdoor. Are you on Nextdoor?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like ask someone, does anyone have sourdough starter? You'll get like 100 people within.
Yeah, no, that's way too creepy. I'm never doing that. Never in a million years am I doing that.
It's like the trending thing on my Nextdoor, literally over 1,000 comments. And like it's spawned because the people who got it originally from the person who was offering it, now they are offering their sourdough starter.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to be really clear. Listeners, friends of the pod, I need no sourdough starter from you. I promise. I think that's uber creepy. I mean, the whole point is we're not in each other's apartment. We're not talking on the street, but you're going to take some stranger's foodstuffs and put it in ingest it? No flipping way. All right. Anyway, so I'm watching a British crime series called The Five.
Okay.
10 parts. Getting a little, I'm on hour 7, getting a little bit complicated.
And you finished Bosch, right?
Yeah, I'm done with Bosch, which I like very much. Somebody posted on Twitter this morning, can you recommend a TV series that's not so complicated that you can watch it and read on your iPhone at the same time? I was like, yeah, I get that. The Five is really good. Interestingly enough, we have a live conversation with Vivian Schiller from the Aspen Institute, and Craig Newmark from the Newmark Philanthropies, and Jay Rosen from the NYU journalism program on Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Facebook. And in kind of planning for that, I asked Craig what he listens to. I wanted a podcast tip. And he said, Preet Bharara. Wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, definitely not.
Interesting though. So anything you're watching, anything people need to be aware of?
Oh my goodness.
Do you do series or movies or both?
I do both. So I think I want to get back into Homeland because I heard that the series finale was really, really good. So I
missed Billions and Homeland Homeland, I missed 2 seasons, and Billions, I missed a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so my parents said that Homeland series finale was phenomenal, and so I was like, okay, that's good motivation to get back into it. So,
my problem with Billions is that Pam finds the characters just unbelievably despicable. Yeah,
but I love Wendy so much as like a character in there, and I just love this interplay of like, are they good? Are they bad? Like, it's just an awesome sort of like, not love triangle. It's like a power struggle, which is really fun.
Maybe I'm feeling shark jumping in their future, but we have not yet. Anyway, all right. So listeners, friends of the pod, this is your chance. Tweet at Alexa, tweet at Magnify Media. Let us know what you're watching. Clue us in on books you're reading, podcasts you're listening to, movies you love. We will share them. We'll give you credit if you want credit, or we'll keep you anonymous if you want to be just a lurker. We're fine with either of those things. But we are out of time. And so with that, we are going to vanish, and we will be back again next week.
Wear a mask. 3-day weekend.
See ya.